A person whose home's fridge was filled not just with food, but with dead bodies. A story which does not end after the murder, it only begins then.
In biology class we had the usual of fetal pigs, and I took the remains of that home and kept the skin. And I just started branching out, dogs, cats. I suppose it could have turned into a normal hobby like taxidermy. And all I know is that I wanted to see what the insides of these animals looked like. There may have been some violence involved, some underlying subconscious feelings of violence.
This is not just the story of a killer. This is the journey of a monster who survived by hiding the deaths of 17 people behind the mask of a normal boy. This is the story of Jeffrey Dahmer, a name which has been written among the most deadly serial killers of America, a hunting devil.
I've met a lot of men who were motivated to commit violence just like me. And without exception, every one of them was deeply involved in pornography, without question, without exception, deeply influenced and consumed by an addiction to pornography. There's no question about it. The FBI's own study on serial homicide shows that the most common interest among serial killers is pornography.
That's true.
And it's real. It's true.
The person to blame is sitting right across from you. That's the only person. Not parents, not society, not pornography. I mean, those are just excuses.
What do you think about what he said about pornography?
Pornography? I've been looking at it all my life and it hasn't affected me anything.
Who not only killed the corpses of his victims, but preserved their body parts, ate them, and kept their pictures with them. From 1978 to 1991, this man killed 17 young boys, one after the other. But his first murder, that was the most horrifying because a monster was born on that day. So let's start from the day that started a story written in blood in American history. June 18th, 1978. Jeffrey Dahmer's first murder. Starting date, time, year of crime involved. It all began on June 18th, 1978. A warm summer evening in Bath Township, Ohio. The sun was setting when a young Jeffrey Dahmer spotted his first victim, 18-year-old hitchhiker, Stephen Hicks. Dahmer, just 18 himself, had recently graduated high school, but instead of heading off to college parties or finding a summer job, he drove straight into darkness. At around 5:30 p.m., he picked up Hicks, offering him a ride, a few beers, and a place to chill. By 7 p.m., Hicks was dead, bludgeoned with a dumbbell, strangled and hidden in the basement. This was no accident. It was the beginning of a chilling reign of terror that would stretch over 13 years and claim 17 innocent lives. And that very night, something inside Jeffrey Dahmer broke permanently.
Who was the killer? The name? Jeffrey Lionel Dahmer. But the world remembers him as the Milwaukee Cannibal. A soft-spoken, polite man with a monster hiding behind his glasses. To neighbors, he was shy and quiet. To his victims, he was death itself. He didn't kill for revenge, money, or hate. He killed because he wanted full control. Control over bodies, over life, over death. He lured young men with offers of cash or photo shoots only to murder them brutally. And then, he kept their remains, sometimes for weeks. He wasn't just a killer, he was a collector, a manipulator, a wolf in sheep's clothing. But every monster has an origin. So where did Jeffrey's madness begin? Killer's real name and early life. Jeffrey Lionel Dahmer was born on May 21st, 1960, in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. His father, Lionel, was a chemist, and his mother, Joyce, struggled with anxiety and depression. From the outside, the Dahmers looked like a normal middle-class family. But behind closed doors, fights, emotional distance, and a child growing colder by the day, Jeffrey was fascinated with dead animals. He'd collect roadkill and store the bones. At just 6 years old, he began showing signs of detachment. His only joy came from anatomy books and taxidermy kits. By the time he turned 10, he was already fantasizing about controlling others, about what it would feel like to own a body. But childhood obsession soon turned into something far darker. Killers, mental health, and childhood trauma. Jeffrey's mind was a storm from early on. His mother's frequent hospitalizations and emotional instability left him craving attention. But instead of love, he found isolation. His father, though intelligent, was emotionally distant. Jeffrey was left alone with his thoughts that turned darker with time. He developed fantasies of complete domination, sexual, violent, disturbing. He began drinking in high school, sometimes even bringing alcohol to class. Teachers noticed, but no one intervened. He admitted later that he felt like something was missing. That missing piece? He tried to fill it with death. Diagnosed later with borderline personality disorder and schizotypal traits, Jeffrey was not insane, just broken beyond repair. And what happens when a broken mind meets the opportunity to kill? It begins. When, where, and how did the first murder happen? It was June 18th, 1978. Jeffrey Dahmer had been left alone at his family home after his parents separated. That's when he picked up Stephen Hicks, a friendly hitchhiker heading to a rock concert. They drank beer, listened to music, talked for hours. But when Hicks said he had to leave, something snapped. Dahmer didn't want to lose him. He grabbed a dumbbell, hit him from behind, and strangled him. It wasn't planned. Once it happened, Jeffrey felt something powerful, something addicting. He said later, "It gave me a sense of total control." Hicks became his first victim, the first of many. And now that he'd crossed the line, there was no going back. Exact time, date, and location of murder? The murder happened on Sunday evening, June 18th, 1978, between 5:30 and 7 p.m. The location? The basement of Jeffrey Dahmer's childhood home at 4480 West Bath Road, Bath Township, Ohio. The house was isolated, surrounded by woods, perfect for hiding secrets. Hicks was killed in silence. No one heard the screams. No one suspected the horror unfolding beneath that suburban roof. And for 13 years, that home kept its secret. Until Dahmer confessed, no one knew that the first blood had been spilled right there. And what he did with the body next was even more horrifying. Who was the victim? Stephen Mark Hicks was just 18 years old, a kind, music-loving teenager from Coventry Township, Ohio. That day, he was on his way to a concert when he accepted a ride from a stranger. He didn't know that stranger would be his last. Friends described him as cheerful, funny, and full of life. He had plans, dreams. He wanted to be a teacher one day. His parents reported him missing when he didn't return home, but the case went cold. For years, Stephen was just a face on a missing poster. Until 1991, when his killer finally confessed. But Stephen's death wasn't the end. It was the beginning of a bloody legacy. What was the method of murder? Dahmer's method was brutally simple. He waited until Hicks was relaxed, distracted, then struck him twice in the back of the head with a 10-pound dumbbell. When Hicks collapsed, he used the bar to strangle him until he stopped moving. The killing was silent, efficient. But what followed was more disturbing. Dahmer stripped the body, stared at it, admitted he was aroused. He kept the body overnight, then began cutting it up. The murder wasn't fueled by anger, it was fueled by obsession, control, possession. The act wasn't just about killing, it was about keeping. And when the body lay lifeless, Dahmer's real work began. What was the murder planning? Officially, it wasn't planned, but mentally, it was years in the making. Jeffrey had been fantasizing about controlling a person for years. This was just the moment he acted. He didn't have tools ready, just raw impulse. But the way he handled the aftermath showed calculation. He dismembered the body, used acid to dissolve flesh, and crushed the bones with a hammer. It was meticulous. He flushed some remains, hid others in the woods. The cover-up was clinical, precise, like he'd rehearsed it in his mind over and over. It may not have been pre-planned. but it was executed with chilling control. And the way he cleaned up was just the start of his sinister blueprint. What was the look, outfit and dialogue of the killer at the time of murder? That night, Dahmer looked like any normal teen. Blue jeans, a white t-shirt and casual sneakers. His face emotionless, calm, but behind that still face, rage and obsession boiled. When Hicks stood to leave, Dahmer's voice was quiet. "Don't go." That was the last thing Hicks ever heard. There was no shouting, no screaming, just the cold swing of metal, followed by silence. Afterward, Dahmer didn't cry, didn't panic. He sat beside the body, touching it, studying it. His face never changed. There was no remorse, just fascination. That blank stare would become the face of America's most terrifying killer. But this wasn't a one-time event. It was only chapter 1. What did the killer do after the murder? Jeffrey Dahmer did not panic immediately after the murder. He hid Stephen Hicks's body in his basement. He sat next to the body all night, sometimes with fear, sometimes with curiosity, and sometimes with a twisted peace. The next morning, he began dismembering the body with a cold mind. He picked up a kitchen knife, separated the limbs, made a plan to put the flesh in acid, dissolved the flesh, separated the bones, and crushed them with a sledgehammer. He put bone fragments into plastic bags and threw them into the wood, flushed the flesh or threw it down the drain, cleaned the entire place with bleach. When his parents returned home, they did not know anything. After the murder, he went to college as if nothing had happened. But that night, Jeffrey was no longer just a boy. He had become a serial killer. But when so much was hidden, did anyone see anything? How did the killer destroy the evidence? Dahmer destroyed everything so cleanly that even the forensic team could not find the evidence even after years. He dismembered Hicks' body and dissolved the flesh with acid. He had made the acid in a container which he had hidden in the basement. When the flesh was in liquid form, he flushed it. The bones were chopped so small with a sledgehammer that they could not even be identified. That bone powder was put into the wood. The murder weapon, the dumbbell, was cleaned with bleach. Blood stains were scrubbed. Not a single fingerprint, clothing, or even a hair strand was left. Jeffrey put on gloves, sealed the bags tightly. And the biggest thing, he didn't say anything to anyone. An explanation that would shock the mind of a trained killer, not an 18-year-old. But did anyone see anything strange around Jeffrey that day? Or was everyone keeping quiet? Was blood or body parts found at the scene of murder? When Jeffrey Dahmer confessed in 1991, the police investigated his house in Bathurst. But by that time, 13 years later, no physical evidence was found. No bloodstains, no body parts. There was not even the smell of bleach in the basement. Everything had been cleaned up. Even Hicks' flesh, bones and belongings had been destroyed. Dahmer explained in detail how he dismembered the bodies, dissolved them in acid, and crushed the bones. Nature had done its work in the woods where the bone fragments were thrown. Rain, insects, and time had destroyed everything. The forensic team had to rely only on his words. Everything was over, except for a confession. But was Jeffrey alone at the time of the murder? Or did someone come close to the truth?
If you have any doubts, please tell me your question and whatever doubts you have in the comments section. I will try my best from my side to reply to you. And please do subscribe to my channel to watch these suspense-filled interviews and true crime documentary videos. Thanks for watching.